Greetings, everyone. Dr. Brian Scott with you again today. We're looking at the signs of the end this week. And this Insight to End Times podcast series began a year and a bit ago, and we've been sharing over the past year. We're now up to episode number 339. We have been sharing the signs of the end times. Jesus was asked a question by his disciples in Matthew chapter 24. And it was verse number 3. They asked him a question, and he answered. And so they said to him, "Tell us, Jesus, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming? And what will be the sign of the end of the age?" So they asked him 3 questions. Essentially, they were saying, when will we know that it's almost the end? What will be the sign of your coming? What will be the sign of the end of the age? We're still asking that question today, some 2,000 years later. Jesus answered the question in Matthew chapter 24. I want to read you a couple verses to show you what his answer consists of. In verse number 4, he says, "You take heed that no one deceives you." He said, you be very, very cautious and careful that you don't fall prey to deception. In verse 5, he said, "Many are going to come in my name, saying, I am the Christ," or "I am a Christian," and they will deceive many. So 2 verses. The thrust is deception is coming. It's going to be strong. It will be overwhelming. Be prepared for it. In verse number 11, he says, "Many false prophets will arise, and they will deceive many." So here he is on the same theme again. Many false prophets will arise. They'll deceive many. And then in verse 23, he says, if anyone says to you, "Look, here is the Christ," or "there is the Christ," don't believe it. Verse 24, "For false Christs, false Christians, and false prophets, they're going to rise up, and they're going to show great signs and wonders to deceive even the very elect, the very best believers." So his disciples said, when will be the sign? What will be the sign of your coming? What will be the sign of the end of the age? And in these 5 verses that I referred to, 6 verses, 11, 23, and 24, he says there's going to be a lot of deception. The very first, most prominent, in-your-face sign will be deception. And aren't we living in that today? We see deception everywhere we look. It's wide scale. It's worldwide. It's coming from every source. So when he starts out, he says, "Take heed that no one deceives you." Person to person, no one deceives you. Then he expands it, and he says there's going to be people who come in the name of, "I am a Christian," and they will deceive many. And then he talks about false prophets coming. And then he talks about them deceiving many. And then he says, hey, we're going to have false Christs, false Christians, false prophets, and they're going to even operate in signs and wonders, and they're going to deceive many as well. So Jesus is telling us over and over again, deception, 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 deception. You know the problem with deception? Most people will see you and they'll know you're deceived, but you won't know it yourself. And when they tell you you're deceived, you'll likely get your back up and you won't listen to them, and you'll turn away from them, and you may even depart from them. And that's another thing he said would occur. So deception hits us in every area of life. It really does. And it's permeating every area of our society. It's very, very, very strong in those who are in leadership positions. The quality of leadership has really taken a downturn in our society today. What does deception do? It attacks the truth. It attacks absolute values that we've known in the past. Now, if you're a young person, you might only have known deception. And you probably are believing a lot of the things that you're being taught in our liberalized school system and university system. But you're not hearing truth anymore. Deceptive language comes across this way. I'm telling you the truth and you better believe it. But no one ever verifies the truth and no one ever investigates the statement. Is it a true statement or is it a false statement? Now, we're getting this in the press all the time. We're getting this from the government leaders all the time. We're being told things all the time that are nowhere close to the truth, so much so that we don't even know what truth is anymore. For instance, on East Coast are Ivy School League schools, like the big schools, universities. There was a gathering of students in a conference setting. They were asked the question, could you define what freedom of speech means in the United States, where it's protected by the Constitution? So they're asked the question, what's freedom of speech? Here's their answer. Freedom of speech is you have the right to say anything that I agree with. How's that freedom of speech? But that's how twisted the university level student forces today. That's how twisted things are. You have the freedom to say anything you want to as long as I agree with it. Well, how will you know if anybody agrees with what you're about to say? That's deception. That's heavy-duty deception. And those people become leaders, and they become government officials and business officials and bankers and educators. They even become parents. And so what they're passing on is full of deception to begin with because they have become indoctrinated with it. And it's a horrible situation that we're facing. But Jesus said it's the major sign of the end of the age. I've got more for you on this week, so tune in tomorrow. We'll have a good time together. Amen.